We're moving on to our next story here, and this is about that crazy bill in the Senate. So there was one bill. We're going to start from the beginning. There was one bill that actually was a border/foreign aid bill. So there was information about what to do with the border. And then there was also a Ukraine package and then a package for Israel as well. As predicted, things did not go in Joe Biden's direction, what he wanted to happen with this bill. The bill did not pass. We're going to get into what happened later on today, but the bill did not pass. Let's go ahead and get into this clip here, but it didn't. I want to say this. The bill didn't pass, but it's not for the reasons that you would think. Let's get into it.
We're going to turn now to politics. As Winston Churchill famously said, democracy is the worst form of government, except for all the others. Well, this week, our elected leaders seem determined to prove that true with enough dysfunction in Washington to rival Thanksgiving at the Logan Roy's. The latest casualty, a $118 billion package in the Senate that paired border security with aid to Ukraine and Israel. It failed to get the 60 votes needed to move forward after Republicans rejected it for not doing enough to secure the border. So now the Senate will try again, focusing only on the foreign aid part of that to Ukraine and Israel and Taiwan. The failure continues a streak of stumbles by congressional Republicans. They failed to pass 2 votes yesterday that should have been, according to Republicans, slam dunks, impeaching Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas and giving more aid to Israel. Frustrating? Sure. But maybe this is just the way things are supposed to work in a two-party system, especially when voters install a divided government. House Speaker Mike Johnson addressed that today and tried to assure Americans Congress is capable of doing its job.
You're seeing the messy sausage making, the process of democracy play out. And it's not always clean, it's not always pretty, but the job will be done at the end of the day.
All right, let's go now to News Nation's Joe Khalid.
So let's pause here for a second. So basically, you see what's happening, ladies and gentlemen. So basically, some of the Republicans voted against the bill because they didn't want the border piece to pass under the Biden administration. So there's that. And then you also have some of the Democrats who also voted against it because they didn't want the Israel. They tend to be more for the Ukraine package, but they didn't want the Israel package to pass. This is mainly just like partisan politics. So what I want you to understand is that for the Republicans that voted against it is not necessarily like they had this moral authority and said, no, I don't want us to give any more money to Israel or to Ukraine. There are a few, very few that are against that. It's more so about partisan politics. They didn't want the border piece to pass under the Joe Biden presidency, similar to when Trump was president and there was a Democrat House and they didn't want the border piece to pass under Donald Trump. So here we go again, partisan politics.
Live for us on Capitol Hill, the messy sausage making. That's a nice way to put what we've watched in the last 24 hours.
I was just going to say messy may be a very nice way of describing that, Elizabeth. So right now in the Senate, you talked about the border and asylum portion of that big bipartisan bill. That is effectively dead. But the other piece of that legislation, which was foreign aid money, military assistance to the tune of $60 billion for Ukraine, $14 billion for Israel, $2.5 billion for Taiwan, that is very much still alive at this moment. We're in a holding pattern on the Senate floor right now, but I've talked to a number of Democrats. They are going to support this. They've been supportive of it for some time now. Republicans are going to be the ones to watch, but even the Republican senators whom I've spoken with say there is a chance they end up voting for this. It depends.
Listen to this. So this is what was proposed, ladies and gentlemen. I just want you to see the dollar amounts. 60 billion Ukraine aid. $60 billion, as if we haven't already given Ukraine enough. 14 billion for Israel. Now, the piece that was blocked was the 20 billion for the border. $2.4 billion for Red Sea operations, and $2.6 billion for Taiwan in the Indo-Pacific. So for those of you watching, I want to be very clear. Our government, federal government, has plenty of money. A lot of it is going out the door. The same way they can give $60 billion to Ukraine and $14 billion to Israel is the same way they can give that money to you. And they can give everybody health care in this country. And the same way that they can fix these schools, fix these damn roads with all these potholes that they still haven't fixed, the same way that they can fix things and improve things for the lives of everyday working class Americans in this country. So I don't know how many times I have to say this. Our government has plenty of money. They're just not spending it on us.
Depends on what ends up being in a final package. It ends up being what, if any, amendments they are allowed to make to this. So they're all sort of keeping their powder dry, but saying they'd be willing and open to do it. They just have to see what the final product looks like. I want to play for you two different perspectives from people we've talked to. They're actually two different Johns, one Democratic John, one Republican John, just about the failure of the border and asylum piece of this and hope that they can resurrect something moving forward. Take a listen.
It was disgraceful that they didn't voted for the border as well, too. It's like, here's a solution for the things that you've been asking for months, and then now they threw one of their own members under the train.
Even though we've been unsuccessful getting the border provision done now, we can't quit trying, but at the same time, I don't think we can hold up the Ukrainian, Israeli, and the Indo-Pacific aid.
You see that, guys? Pay attention to that. We can't hold up aid when it comes to giving it to another country, but they can hold up aid when it comes to giving it to you. When it's in reference to Ukraine and Israel or any other country that they're trying to give aid to, we can't hold this up. This is urgent. We need to pass this right now. But they make you jump through hoops. Some of you jump through hoops just to get SNAP benefits. Joe Biden cut and reduced SNAP benefits, but they're giving billions to Ukraine, Israel, and Taiwan. So from this point, there was a change because the House actually failed to pass the standalone Israel aid bill as the Senate package stalls. This is important. What they tried to do is they said, well, let us just separate the Israel aid so that we can still give that aid to Israel. So listen to this. Let me remove this part here. By a vote of 250 to 180, the House voted against the legislation that would send $17.6 billion to Israel, with 166 Democrats and 14 Republicans opposing the measure. The bill required the support of 2/3 of the House to pass. House Speaker Mike Johnson called the vote's failure a disappointing rebuke to our closest ally in the Middle East at their time of great need. So it failed in the House. I'm going to show you one of the people that said they warned they were going to vote against it. It goes on to say, he said the GOP made a major concession by putting a clean standalone bill up for a vote to address Democrats' previous concerns. It is clear they are now committed to using Israel aid as leverage to force through other priorities that do not enjoy nearly the same degree of consensus. Leveraging Israel's aid as it fights for survival is wrong. I don't think that Israel is fighting for survival. I think Gaza is fighting for survival. Israel is committing genocide against the Palestinians in Gaza. So the Palestinians in Gaza are the ones that are fighting for survival, not the Israelis. So you see how they word these things? So it goes on to say here, passage of the standalone bill would have further complicated efforts in the Senate to rally support for the bipartisan national security package that appears to be on life support. Johnson announced the Israel legislation in a letter to colleagues on Saturday, one day before unveiling the Senate's broader security package. Okay, but there's a lot of fuming going on. Chuck Schumer was upset. He gave a statement. he is actually in disagreement with Ro Khanna, because you're going to hear what Ro Khanna had to say when he told people that he was not going to be supporting this bill. It's really interesting. Everybody plays their part. Everybody plays their part. Let's bring in this clip here from Chuck Schumer. It says Chuck Schumer explodes and attacks Donald Trump for causing chaos in the House. Listen to this, ladies and gentlemen.
I'm not going to be long. So first, Republicans said they would only do Ukraine and Israel humanitarian aid with border. Then they said they wouldn't do it. They would not do it with border. Well, we're going to give them both options. We'll take either one. We just hope they can come to yes on something. The bottom line is very simple. We knew about a week ago when Trump mixed in and said, wanted to be political and said he'd prefer chaos at the border because he thinks it helps him electorally. We knew that we might have to have a second option. So I then called the White House and told my caucus that if, unfortunately, the big supplemental bill failed, we would do everything but border. And that's what the bill, we're posting it right now so everyone can see it. That's what the bill we're doing does. It has everything that we had in the original supplemental negotiations, but without border, although we do have the fentanyl issue, and that's not a border issue, but that is.
So you notice what he did? So he had a plan B just in case they actually did not vote for this bill, which included the border and Israel and Ukraine all as one. So you see how they do you? You see how they can have a plan B? They got a backup plan. When it comes to funding other countries, they're not only pushing forth bills urgently, but they also got backup bills just in case the first one doesn't pass. When do you see them move this way for you? You ever see them move this fast for the American people? No, we're never an urgency for them. Never urgency. And that's all the politicians. When it comes to the military industrial complex, they don't even sit there and second guess it. They move quickly and urgently. When it comes to the welfare of the people in this country, they take their damn time and they drag their feet.
Very, very important. And so we just hope they can come to yes, and we will have the second vote if the first vote fails. I still hope that they would rethink the first vote. Donald Trump wants chaos. Donald Trump does not want success at the border. He wants chaos, and if he became president, I doubt he'd ever solve it, as Mitch McConnell said. And so we want them to pass the border bill, and if they vote against border, America will know who is for fixing the border and who is not. But if it fails, we still believe Ukraine, Israel, humanitarian aid to the Middle East and help in Indochina, as well as strengthening our military, is vitally important. For all those Republicans who first said, we want it with border, and now say we want it without border, they got both options.
Let me pause here for a second. So he's saying this is because of Donald Trump, that the Republicans are basically listening to what Donald Trump wants them to do, even though he's not president. That may be the case. But it could also be the case that, let's be clear here, it is corporations, it is corporate interests, it is corporate greed that wants this to happen. It is foreign policy interventions in other countries and destroying other countries, putting sanctions on a lot of these countries. You can make a direct link when you look at the countries where people are coming from. You can make a direct link to our foreign policy decisions in those countries. So two things can be true at one time. That's the thing. It's not always this side or that side. Sometimes both are true. So it could be true that the Republicans in the House are listening to Donald Trump and doing what he wants them to do, and in the Senate. But it could also be true that the foreign policy decisions that this country has committed in other countries is the reason why we have the migration that we have right now. So when you ask people and they say, where are people coming from? And people mention countries like Venezuela, the U.S. government has done multiple coups in Venezuela. Anya Parampil wrote an entire book about this. This is very clear. You talk about there are people at the border that are coming from Belarus. We got the Ukraine war, which was provoked by NATO and the United States government. People aren't just coming here just because they woke up one day and was like, oh, I think I'm going to make this long, dangerous, life-threatening trek just because I want to check out and see what America's like. They're coming here because they have nowhere else to go because we destroyed their countries. Now, Chuck Schumer He's going to mention the Donald Trump part, but notice he does not mention the foreign policy part. He can't, because if he did, he wouldn't have that position.
On amendments, because I know you'll ask that. We have always been for a fair and open amendment process. Under my leadership, we've done far more amendments than when McConnell was majority leader, and we will have a fair and open process on amendments, okay?
You're in the same position you were 5 months ago, trying to pass this bill without border. Do you have any assurances that the Speaker would actually bring this bill up in the House?
Look, the bottom line is the majority of Republicans in the House said they want to do Ukraine, they want to do Israel, and we hope that if we pass it in the Senate, that the House would then rise to the occasion. The House is in chaos. It doesn't behoove the Speaker well to block everything because 30 hard right-wing people just want chaos like Donald Trump does.
You see this? I would argue we have chaos right now, too. Listen to the thing, when they talk about the chaos and they say chaos is always under Donald Trump, don't we have chaos under Joe Biden, too? Okay, think about that. Now, Ro Khanna actually sent a warning earlier on. Ro Khanna said, I will vote no on the 17 billion aid package. Listen to this. So it's not like they weren't warned.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I will vote no today on the 17 billion aid package, which provides a blank check to Netanyahu, Ben-Gvir, and the extreme right-wing government in Israel. How dare Ben-Gvir, Israel's national security minister, have the gall to criticize America while calling for the mass expulsion of Palestinians? I will vote no because this bill includes zero humanitarian aid while children are dying and 400,000 Gazans face famine. I will vote no because this bill undermines human rights and international law, ignoring the recent ICJ decision calling on Israel to do more to protect Palestinian civilians. I will vote no because it is painfully obvious to the entire world that what is needed today is a permanent ceasefire and a release of all hostages. There come moments in a nation's history when our actions reveal our values. This is such a moment. We must stand for stopping the bombing, for ending this brutal war, and for justice in the Middle East with a Palestinian state with equal rights living side by side with Israel.
Now, make no mistake, ladies and gentlemen, Ro Khanna stood up there and gave that statement, but keep in mind, there was a video I played on this show a while back of his own constituents calling into his, whatever this was, I think it was like a conference call. He had a conference call with his own constituents, and there was a Jewish woman that called in, and she really let him have it, and she told him, you're not calling for a ceasefire. She said, you can sit up here and you can say goodbye to your presidential ambitions. So don't be mistaken. There has been pressure that have come from Ro Khanna's district, from his constituents, that pressured him to call for a ceasefire. That was all caught on videotape, made the rounds on Twitter. And two, if you know that the bill itself is going to pass anyway, it is a lot easier to vote against something when you know that your vote is not going to prevent it from passing. I told you this happens before with the squad. They tend to do this. I guess Ro Khanna is not really part of the squad, but he in cahoots with them sometimes. They tend to do this. It's like they are willing to vote their conscience when they know that their vote is not going to prevent the bill from passing. But when they know that their vote will prevent the bill from passing, they will not do that. You have to pay. I've been paying attention to this for a long time. But make no mistake, Ro Khanna received pressure from his constituents. Now, this is the part here about the Plan B, which is what Chuck Schumer was referring to. Senate to vote on Plan B, Ukraine funding without the border security. So I'm just going to read a little bit here, and then I'm going to show you the update that happened later. It says here, Schumer still plans to hold a procedural vote on proceeding to the Ukraine and Israel funding package that includes border security reforms. That way, he can give vulnerable Democratic colleagues a chance to vote for it and argue on the campaign trail that they tried to address the crisis at the border. But the Republicans are expected to block that package. And then Schumer said he will move to Plan B. Schumer has told Senate Dems he is planning to put the negotiated supplemental on the floor without the border security piece after the expected failed cloture vote on Wednesday. So what actually ended up happening? It says Senate advances Ukraine and Israel aid after the GOP blocked the larger border bill. So you see how this is all a game, you guys. It says here, the Senate voted Thursday afternoon to proceed with a stripped down bill that would provide aid to Israel, Ukraine, and Taiwan, one day after Republicans in the chamber rejected a bipartisan border security and foreign aid bill. The vote of 67 to 32 means the Senate can begin consideration of the $95 billion package. Although the next steps are uncertain, it is not yet clear it will have enough votes for the final passage in the chamber. But do you see this? You see all this money going out the door? $95 billion. $95 billion. Notice how when people were running on more progressive issues and they said they wanted to give everybody health care, or they said that they wanted to have free college at public universities, notice the big pushback from the status quo was, how are you going to pay for it? Nobody asked this question when it comes to giving billions of dollars to other countries in order for them to have these wars. And what would be helpful is if we had people in the Senate and in the House that would stand up and push back on them and say, how are you going to pay for it when it comes to these wars? Nobody asked that question. When it comes to death and destruction, bombing countries, committing genocide, nobody asked, how are you going to pay for it? That's $95 billion possibly going out the door, ladies and gentlemen. Some of you can't pay for groceries. Some of you have to ration your medicine. Some of you may have shoes that are falling apart that you have to kind of put tape on to keep it together because you can't afford to buy a pair of new sneakers. But they got $95 billion going out the door. Some of you live in states where the minimum wage is still $7.25 an hour. But $95 billion going out the door. They can't give money to you. They can't give you health care. Ladies and gentlemen, wake up. When people push back and say, I don't want my tax dollars to pay for reparations for something that I did not commit to and I was not born for, honey, they got $95 billion. It's not your tax dollars. These are federal dollars going to everybody else but us. And we're going to talk about what's happening in New York City tomorrow night. And you're really going to be pissed when you see what else, other money that's going out that's not going to you. You pay taxes. You paid your dues. And they got money for everybody else but you. Always remember that.